Is there also a personal chapter for you involved, or don't you?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. Like, I think of it as our songs. I mean, it's not a rock opera, so it's not like we just make up characters. Our albums, there's kind of like made up people or composites of people we know. There's real people. We've named quite a few songs after real people. There's us, you know. So there is a sense of the you know, that's personal. So every album, I think you're kind of exploring these people and how things change for them along the way. And I could even think of little mini trilogies of 3 songs, one from each, that maybe I could imagine being the same person. But if I had to describe them in chapters, it's funny. It kind of reminds me of certain books that I've read. Like the opening chapter is this kind of, you know, springtime. It's, you know, school days. It's very youthful. I mean, we were young when we wrote those songs. A lot of those songs were written before any of us had even had a real job before, you know, so I associated very much with that chapter in my life. Then Contra was kind of, felt like this sudden expansion, and kind of the world opened up, and, you know, we were touring and growing up and like seeing all these places, and compared to Contra, the first album strikes me as a little bit provincial, in a nice way, but it's, you know, a small world. And then this record, in some ways, almost feels like a return home, but maybe with some new ideas, some new feelings. I think it's the approach to relationships and stuff like that on this album is in decidedly new territory. So maybe if you put them all together, it's just kind of like growing up. I don't know.
Is it looking back also a little bit at a yeah, maybe a strange youth? I mean, it's a lot of youthful years that you put in this work, and I can imagine now you are a bit older, that you maybe reflect a little bit on how you spent your early 20s.
Sure. And so, of course, the way that we spent our 20s,
it's abnormal, maybe, yeah, in a way.
Well, it's abnormal in some ways, but it also gave us a little bit of perspective. We toured so hard and recorded. We had a crazy 4 years, 2007 through 2011. So many things changed. And when we finally stopped, it was a little bit shocking to be calm and quiet for a while and suddenly have all this time, be alone with your thoughts. And I think that definitely impacted the mood of this album.
Can you describe that maybe the moment that the previous album era ended for you and you found yourself maybe alone home?
Sure. Well,
Was it a comfortable feeling?
Well, it's, you know, I try to keep everything in perspective. I mean, when Contra ended, when we stopped touring behind Contra, I didn't even have an apartment anymore because I'd been homeless for a year on the road, traveling all over the world and stuff. And so then I decided, rather than go back to New York at first, maybe I'd go back to LA and experience living there, because I always liked spending time in LA, but I never lived there. So I was in LA kind of thinking like, oh, you know, is this a place I could live? And I was definitely keeping my eye on the future, thinking about the next album, but suddenly I had a lot of free time. And being in LA gave me a very funny sense of time. You know, suddenly the things I was used to that gave me a sense of the seasons changing vanish. I mean, it's a very common thing people from the East Coast say when they go to LA. And I'm just kind of hanging out, and this very kind of strange malaise set in. And I'm sure it sounds very overdramatic, but I had this like very subtle sensation of almost like being in the afterlife or something. I'd done all these things. As a band, we'd accomplished so much, and we'd been all over the world. And then suddenly I just found myself in LA every day. It was a nice breeze, and things didn't change. And I'd kind of hang out and go feel a little bit aimless. And I really had this very weird sense, almost of being like half dead. And, you know, it kind of reminded me of like a early Bret Easton Ellis novel or something, just kind of like hanging out. And it definitely it was weird. It was like the momentum stopped, and I felt kind of like at times very alone, you know, even though I was with friends and stuff.